about that. Today we have with us Miss Dayna Seelig, who is a retired professor of 27 years from Morehead State University. Now, listen to this bio because it's just incredible. I love it. She was raised to appreciate traditional Southern cuisine that include and agree with so many of these, if you can, that included canning and preserving food with her grandmothers. She was raised in Lexington on a thoroughbred horse farm in Flemingsburg, Kentucky. Cooking and baking provided a relaxing outlet for her and for her creative energies. How many of you can say that? Cooking is what just gives you that relaxation. So today, over the next hour, we hope that it's just that relaxing time for you to listen and to love. But she loves to watch her friends and family enjoy of each other around the food and the table. Okay. She lives in Mount Sterling with her husband, Mike. And this is what, when I read this, I told her, I said, this just made my heart smile. Both of her sons have their own specialty items, and they too love to cook, a tradition that's been passed along over the next generation. And the first question that her two grandchildren, Hadley and Quinn Brown, both ask as soon as they come to her house is, what do we get to bake today? Dayna can be followed at the KentuckySpiritedChef.com, and I'll put that in our chat for us, and on Facebook at the Kentucky Spirited Chef. And she has a bake shop on Facebook at the KSC Bake Shop. In addition, she has started a YouTube channel called the Kentucky Spirited Chef, Make It With Me. It is our absolute honor to have Miss Dayna with us today, and she's going to talk about all the joys of cooking and kind of telling her story to us about kind of what got her started. And I am so excited. This has been one of those sessions you all know that I've been super pumped about. And I shared a little bit of our story of how we got started with our cookbook. And of course, she was just like, tell me more about it. Tell me about this project. Tell me, are you going to be selling this? And we were like, no, this is just the love of our family within our grants. And so, Dayna, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to it. And what I'd like to do with the PowerPoint slides, I'd really like to talk to you face to face. And then when I say next slide, if you'll just show the slide and I'll talk over the slide. Would that be possible, Jamie?
Yes, that's fine. Do you want to turn it off for now?
Yeah, turn it off for now, and then I'll say show the next slide, and it's a picture, and I'll talk about it when the picture's pulled up.
Okay, no
Thank
problem.
you very much. All right. So she told you a little bit about who I am. But one of the things that I did all the time was clinical writing, professional presentations. And one of the things that I learned in school was that um, it was important to learn how to do the technical writing and everything. But that was not my first love. As a faculty member at the university, I had to do the technical writing. I had to do the presentations. I had to do those things in order to keep my job and to progress. And so I wanted to tell you my favorite high school class, though, was creative writing. I'm just wanting to make sure everybody can see me because I'm seeing Jamie, but everybody can see me, correct? Yes, there we go. Okay. And so my favorite class was creative writing. We wrote poems, short stories. We were able to create a book, very much like you're creating a cookbook. We created this book of our creative writings. I never got to do that after I left high school. Everything after that was all technical, all professional. And so when I finally got to teach at the university, I started doing things like case studies and authentic learning lessons. I flipped my classroom. Everything was done from a critical thinking and authentic learning lesson inside my classroom. And I watched my classrooms raise a whole letter grade over a 6 semester area because I changed the way I taught, which was creative. And so I think these kind of projects that you all are doing and that you're integrating into your classroom really helps the students cement the information in rather than I see myself as a creator, not a regurgitator. I always did as a teacher. And so I always like to do something that made the students really think, why am I learning this and how can I use this? And so I applied that throughout my career. So if you'll show up the next slide, it says Tuesday, August 29th. This is what started the whole cookbook thing. I really didn't want to write a cookbook. I gave my recipes to all my friends. They kept losing the recipe. They said, could you send it to me again? And I would send them 2 or 3 recipes. And they said, why don't you just write a book? And I said, I don't know how to write a book. I said, I know how to write a clinical case study for cardiac patients, but I said, I've never written a book. And they said, oh, you can learn. If you can write a clinical case study, you can learn. I said, oh, okay, but it may take me a little while. And then my kids asked me about my grandmother's chili sauce recipe. And we called her Dee Dee. So if you'll take the slide down, I'll show you the book. This book, when my grandmother passed away, I got all of her recipe books. And this was in it. I didn't think it was a recipe book. It's just a date book in 1939. But when I opened it up, in her handwriting were all these wonderful recipes. And that chili sauce recipe was in there. So I started with it. We started making the chili sauce again, which we had not had for years. And one of the things I noticed in the book, it had some really strange ingredients in it. And they called lard something else back then. And so it took me a little while to figure out how to recreate these recipes. And in my first book, and I'll show you that in a few minutes, my first book were half historical recipes from my grandmother's date book. And the other thing is, she didn't stop there. She wrote them on slips from the bank. I found a whole box of these recipes, and it was just like a treasure trove that I got to look at. And your all's recipe book is going to be just like that too. You're going to look at it and you're going to know your friends and the people that you've been online with, and you're going to try the recipes and listen to the stories. And those are really, really important. So one of the things I had to do before I wrote a book was research. And I thought, okay, if I'm going to write a book, I really need to think about, how am I going to present this work? And I thought, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to see if I can make a little money at it. I'm not just going to do it and bind it because I was bored. I retired at 60. I have a lot of energy. I really like to create things. And so I thought, well, this will be something that will help me fill my time. And so I started researching. I went to Barnes and Nobles, I went to Joseph Beth, I went to bookstores, and I looked at the books that were facing out, the ones that the people in the bookstore thought were, probably bestsellers that people want to buy. And one of the things I noticed about them is, well, I'm not Reese Witherspoon, and I'm not Martha Stewart, and I'm sure not Pioneer Woman. So I thought, how am I going to sell this book when everything that's, turned out is actually somebody famous? When I looked at their books, they were pretty good, and I really liked Reese Witherspoon's, and the Pioneer Woman was good too, but it didn't have the stories about me or about Kentucky. And so I decided I didn't see a lot on Kentucky when I went through it. And I did see some Kentucky bestseller books, and they've been on the shelves for a long time. So I asked some people, I said, where do I get this? They said, it's out of print. So we didn't have anything much for Kentucky. And I thought, well, I've got this book my grandmother gave me. And I could start some recipes that are historical and then add some of my others in as well. So when I looked at the recipes, and I'm not going to show you the front of this book, but it's one of the more famous ones. One of the things you notice is there's not one picture in it. So what I did is I took a group of friends to the bookstores, and I said, tell me which of these books you really like and why do you like them? And to a person, they said, I want a picture. I want a picture of the food. I want a recipe. And I love the stories that go with it. This is not a famous person. It is 100 best appetizer recipes, and I got it at a bargain barn. But I use it more than the book that doesn't have pictures in it. And so I thought my book has to have pictures. So then I needed some education. I thought, okay, so if I'm going to make money, I can't hire a photographer every time I make a recipe. So I took a food class on food photography. I decided Ingram Spark was going to be the way that I was going to publish my book. I was going to be an independent published book because obviously, Random House is not going to choose me because I'm not the pioneer woman. And so I had to do that to be able to really market my book. And so what I did is I took the food photography class. Ingram Spark has those. They know that people that are independent book authors are going to need some education. It was marketing, how to sell to a vendor, how to present yourself to a vendor, pricing, how to work with different software programs. So I had to learn all these things before I could actually do a book for sale. I've done cookbooks like you've done. I've done them with my church. I've done them with women's group. Those are some of my favorite cookbooks because I've eaten their food. I've eaten them at potlucks. I've eaten them at church. So I go to those recipes. I don't even need a picture because I have tasted the real thing. However, if anybody was going to buy my book, they didn't know me. They were going to have a picture. So one of the most important things after I learned that was I needed feedback. So if you'll show the next slide. I had taste tests. And the taste tests are really important because you think your food's good and your family thinks your food's good, but you need other people to tell you, yes, this does taste good. So I had 12 friends that I trusted that are kind of foodies that really were honest. They had a good palate. And I told them the only criteria for coming to a food tasting where they had to taste 15 different items within a 2-hour period and give me feedback on a checkoff list. And it was about texture, taste, spice, heat, all kinds of things. And they couldn't just say, oh, it tastes good. So they had to actually do some work to get to the tasting. That was for my first book. And then the second book, I had 25 people, and my husband helped me prepare all the tastings of 17 different things because those were all my new recipes. No historic recipes were in there. They were all new recipes. And these were 17 that I really wanted feedback on. Okay, you can go take the slide down. And I want to talk about once you begin writing your cookbook, there's other things you need to do. Choose your recipes. And one of the things I decided to do, and when I wrote my first book, as you can see, it's thin. I didn't want to fill it up with just a bunch of written recipes just to have a thick book. I wanted to put only my best that we use all the time with my family. And if you look behind me here, the 2 cookbooks that I use all the time are my 2 cookbooks because those are my favorite recipes. And if you open it up, it's splattered with chocolate. It might have a little smear of something else on it. And I went to somebody's house and they said, I'm so sorry, your book is dirty where I've used it. I said, that's the greatest compliment you can give me is your book's dirty, you're using it. And so after I figured out what recipes, and the title was hard. And the title, picking out my title as the Kentucky Spirited Chef. I really wanted to be the tipsy chef since I was doing all bourbon, but that was already taken. So I decided to be the Kentucky Spirited Chef, and it worked out much better anyway, because I am Kentucky focused. And so then had to figure out how to format it, and ISBN numbers and copyright. There's a lot when you're going to publish and try to make money from it. But the biggest thing is revisions, and use an editor, get people to proofread it. You know what you wrote, and every time you read it, you know what you meant, but somebody else can find the issues in it. And I had 5 people read my entire book before I went to publish, and I still had a mistake in it. And it was the publisher that made it. They changed all my 2 teaspoons of pepper to 2 tablespoons of pepper. I had to put an errata sheet in the front with the first run of publishing, but they changed it afterwards. So those are the things that you really need to think about. So if you'll put up the next slide, I want to talk about what subjects in school were used in creating my cookbook. So history, cultural significance. I mean, it's all about Kentucky. It's about the stories in my book talk about my family. It talks about when you look at the burgoo recipe, the fact that it was at my, in Fleming County, we had court days. And every court day, these 5 men would go down with a huge cauldron and make burgoo. And I could not wait until 12 o'clock noon on the first day of court day to go down and get my cup of burgoo. So there's cultural significance. Writing, you've got to write for an audience, for a purpose, clear instructions. One of the things I did for clear instructions, my husband is not a baker. He's a good cook, but making these recipes, I would have him make the recipe and then tell me where he got stuck so I could create the instructions better, make it clear. Writing for an audience that's going to read these books is very different than writing for a cardiac conference. And so that was a little hard for me. Art, especially the photography, but also the food design and placement makes a huge difference for a commercial book that you're going to try to sell. Math, baking requires measuring and ratios and doubling and having recipes. And one of the things I did not do that I'm okay with it. I did not put it in the metric system as well as the United States system. My books are selling great in Sweden and Germany, go figure. And then chemistry, rewriting the recipes require knowing what elements work together. So all these subjects that not only I learned in school, but my students had to use when creating their cookbook. Okay, go to the next slide, please. My 2 books had cultural significance. The first one on the right is Beyond the Glass, Bourbon Recipes from Horse Country. And this was an all bourbon. I told you it was part history recipes, and the other were half mine. And then the one on the left, Bourbon Wine and Shine, of course, in Kentucky, not only do we have vineyards, we make moonshine, legal moonshine, and bourbon. So all the recipes either have bourbon wine or shine in them. And so that's the cultural significance that goes with these books. Okay, if you'll go to the next slide. So why is this recipe important? And then I'm going to show you something in a minute that I did. I have 2 books that I published, but one of them is not published. The third one's not published. It's just for my family. This is my great-grandmother. She was my idol. She taught me to cook. Snickerdoodles was her favorite. You can tell this is a well-loved recipe. When I went to her house as a kid, she would make a whole fried chicken and snickerdoodles. She says you can eat healthy when you go home. And I took the snickerdoodle recipe, and I have a recipe, if you go to my Facebook page, that is a bourbon maple cream snickerdoodle. I take a snickerdoodle and I put cream cheese, maple extract, and a little bit of bourbon cream all in the center, and roll it up and put the cookie around it. And when you bake it, you've got a crisp outside, a soft middle, and a real creamy center. And so that's why this recipe is important. Okay, if you'll take down the slide, I'll show you my other cookbook. So this is Heritage Recipes, recipes from my family's home and hearth. And I did this because, you know, your family photos are either in the attic, they're in the garage, or they're somewhere stored away and you never look at them. And I wanted my grandkids to know their family, and I wanted to know their history. And so one of the things I asked my sons and grandkids, I said, if I were to pass away tomorrow, what recipe would you hope that I would have written down that you can continue to make it? Because I said I didn't have that with my grandmother until I found this book. So what would you like? And so they gave me a whole list of recipes, and a lot of them were the things that I had made from my family's recipes. So one of the things I did was I put in, and I don't know how you can see it here, but it is our family tree on both sides. And then what I did was for every family member, not only do they have a picture of the family member, but they have their name underneath that goes with the tree. And then some of them are scary, I will tell you that. Some of them have lots of rifles across their laps, and not a one of them is smiling. And the other thing is, I'm kin to the McCoys. We didn't steal the pig. And so that's a story that's in here for the kids. My great-grandfather preached his last sermon at 96. We sat and listened to it. I think he spoke 96 minutes because he knew it was his last. I told my mom if he could preach it, we could sit there. And so these stories are in there, but the really fun thing is that my mom was still alive. So what I had her do was write all of her recipes in her handwriting. And so this whole book is both sides of the family and all the favorite recipes that come from my family. And I gave it all to them for Christmas. So that's another project. What you're doing is so important. And you will go back to that book and you will have so many memories of your friends that you've seen on here, and you've made the recipes, and you all will talk with each other about the recipes you made. And that's the oral history and the fun of doing that. Okay, let's go back to the slides. We should be to the Tipsy Pecan Cake. And so this one, my great-grandmother Spencer's recipe. It's been on my Spencer family Christmas table since the late 1800s. And it was lost in the 1980s, and there's a reason why. My dad and my grandmother kind of got into a feud. And while it was still okay, she never had us over to dinner, and she's the one that made the cake. And so it was lost forever until I found that little book. And one of the things that was in the book was a teacup of whiskey. Okay, you can go ahead and take that down. I don't know how big your teacup is, but when she says a teacup of whiskey, I don't know if it's a little teacup, a big teacup, a coffee cup. So I had to do this recipe several times. It was such a chore, and I ate it a lot. The other thing it said was quart of whole pecans. Who measures pecans by the quart? And so I had to put pecans in a quart jar, and then I had to measure them out, and it's about a pound. And so I was able to recreate it. It took me 2 or 3 times. You wrap this like a fruit cake with bourbon soaked cloths, and you don't eat it until a week later. And by the time it comes out and you've soaked it 3 times with those cloths, when you slice it, you better not eat 2 of my bourbon balls and a slice of this cake. I will tell you, it makes your lips numb. So this is not, I've got 2 recipes in there that are not for children in my bourbon, and this is one of them. And the bourbon balls that I make that have a half shot of bourbon in each bourbon ball. You can really taste it. So anyway, this story is important because I had to recreate it, had to keep measuring things. And when you're baking, when you're cooking, baking is an exact science, but when you are cooking, how many of you just shake, when you're making spaghetti sauce or you're doing something else? I had to use a cheesecloth and shake like I would normally shake, and then put it in, cook it, and taste it. If I needed more, I had to lay the cheesecloth down, add more, because I had to have exact measurements for my book. That was probably one of the hardest things I had to do, because when I cook, I never measured. I did it by taste. Okay, let's look at the next slide. Why is a picture of the food important? So if you didn't have a picture of this cheese ball that looks like a pine cone, and I just gave you written instructions, I'm sure most of you would never try the recipe. And it's one of the easiest recipes that you can make, and it has a huge impact. And people just rave over it when they see it, on a table. And all it is a cheese ball shaped like a pine cone. And then you start at the bottom and put the pines up. And you wash your greenery and wrap it and stick it in the top. And it makes a real festive item. Excuse me. Go to the next slide, please. And make it personal. You draw them in. There's my 2 grandkids when they were younger. We were cooking together. That's 5 generations at the bottom. And 3 of those women and my father were the ones that really taught me how to cook. And that's in my family cookbook. And the other one is my husband and my father, who's no longer with us, but they enjoyed what they called was the perfect Manhattan. Now, I could have taken a picture just of the Manhattan, a picture of the drink, but that wouldn't make you want to drink it as much as if you saw these 2 having fun drinking this Manhattan. Okay, the next picture. Excuse me. Now you have to hook them from the first page. And one of these things that I wanted to do was I wanted my book to be different. And I wanted it to, the very first page to speak to them so that they would open it up to see what else was in it. And so one of the things that this says, when you look at the picture on the right, that's the first page of my book called Bourbon Recipes from Horse Country. Kentucky women are as comfortable in the drawing room as they are in a horse barn. And so it connected all the pieces of my life together. And it was an interesting picture. And people talked about this picture with the horses in the background and the beautiful clouds more than almost any other picture in my book. Next slide, please. Now you have to choose the right photo. The one on the left is a really nice picture. However, the more interesting photo is on the left is a nice picture. The one on the right is a more interesting photo. Those are the things I learned in the food photography class. And I also learned how to make your sauce drip just the right way. And so I use these photos. Next slide, please. This was brunch. Nice photo, great color on the left, but you can't see the food well. So you have to use the picture that showcases the food. Next slide. I was going to write a 3rd book, but printing got so expensive that I've been holding on to these things. And this is called Brunch by the Lake, and it is a subheading within the 3rd book I'm thinking about writing. And I wanted people to look at it real carefully, not only for the food by the lake on the dock, but to listen to the story. That dock out there in the middle of the lake, I used to jump off of it from the time I was 10 years old all the way through high school when we used to have church programs out there. It was Park Lake in Fleming County. And so I included that picture as a picture of interest. Next slide. We're almost there, and then we'll talk a little more. Elements of picture design that the food photography told me about. This is my peach bourbon slushie. It's a patio drink, or this is what I put by the front door when people come for a party at our house. You know how everybody rushes for the wine table or the drink table as soon as they get in the door? I always hand them one of these, and then they can trade in their glass for whatever they want later. And that way they start to mingle as soon as they come in the house. This element of design shows you don't put it in the center, you put it off center and blur it in the back. The other picture on the right-hand side was the picture I used for the front of my 2nd book. And I wanted to convey a southern porch, relaxed lunch, pink lemonade, hydrangeas, and a lace tablecloth. We took about 30 pictures to get the one I wanted for this one. And next slide. There's other opportunities that come along after I wrote the book because of the cultural significance and the connection to Kentucky. Renee Shaw, I was on her show twice, once at her studio, and then she and the camera crew came to my house and she cooked with me. 2 different recipes. It's still up out there if you're interested, but those are all the foods that are in my second book. And so she came, we talked about all the food, and we talked about the hospitality. Okay, let's go back to the screen with me. That's the end of the slides. And so one of the things that we talked about on the show was Kentucky's known for its hospitality. And, I lived in Fleming County, Kentucky. After we moved from Lexington, we moved to Fleming County on a horse farm. And as you entered the county, there was a sign everywhere that says, Flemingsburg is the friendly town that hospitality built. And that's what we're known for in Kentucky. We're known for our hospitality, opening our homes, good food, and spending time with each other. And so I want to open the floor. If you have some questions, I've talked a lot, I've shown you a lot of different things. So the other the other thing I learned from high school was presentation skills. When I was a freshman in high school in Fleming County, Linda McKee, my speech teacher, drama teacher, came to me and she said, "You have a handicap." I said, "A handicap?" She said, "Yes, you can't even get up in front of a class and say your name." I would drop my head. I was so shy. I could not even walk in front of the class without just blushing and turning beet red and almost panicking. My guidance counselor says, "You've got to take public speaking." I cried. I begged. I said, "Please don't make me take public speaking." And they both said, "You got to take it." She took me from someone who couldn't say my name in front of a class to winning the speech contest that year, state speech contest. That's what a good teacher can do. That's when someone really cares about you, can take the time to help you do things for the rest of your life. I wouldn't be able to do what I do today without Linda McKee, and I wouldn't be able to talk to you today and feel comfortable about it had she not removed the barrier that I had. So I wanted to go into teaching. I'm so glad all of you like to be in teaching, and I'm so excited to hear more about your project. So I'll give you an opportunity to ask questions if you'd like.
I have a question. My family does a lot of tanning, so I was just wondering, do you have like any recipes that are particular to your family that are like tanning recipes?
The chili sauce is, but you don't really have to pressure cooker it because it's got a lot of vinegar in it. So it's a hard water bath, and then you seal it down, and it makes great Christmas gifts. We use it on fried potatoes, soup beans. I put it in my chili. Actually make my chili, my sweet chili with that. My bourbon bacon barbecue chili is made differently, but the sweet chili that the family likes has that chili sauce in it. I'd be glad to share the recipe with you all. The other things is I always just canned green beans. I lived on a farm. I broke beans. I didn't do anything fancy like tomato sauce or anything like that, but a lot of beans. I did cabbage. I did make Italian sauce. I haven't done that for years. The last canner I had was a great big one that had all these turners around it. It's not and finally it blew. I had green beans on my ceiling, and I think that scared me, and I haven't done any canning since then. It was my grandmother's canner. I probably would do okay if I got a new canner, but I go to the farmer's market a lot and get fresh beans all summer long. Other questions?
Okay, you've been talking about your family and you look so familiar. Are you related to Denise Spencer?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
And
I work at
Tyler,
Yes.
yes, Tyler, and I'm kin to her by my brother was married to her, and her son and daughter got these books, and their kids got these books as well.
Oh, I love that. Okay, I'm sorry. I just
Yes.
had to ask. I was like, you all look so familiar, like so familiar.
Yes, we do
Okay.
look more alike than my brother and I did. Yes.
Okay, I was just like, I had to ask. Okay, thank you. I love
Yes, and
cookies.
she was just over here buying a butter pecan cake. Well, uh, we're always together with her kids, Lindsay and Tyler. Yes.
I love that. That's just
Yeah.
great. And I love the storytelling between your recipes. I mean, I could totally see my family us doing something like this for I just lost my grandmother, so it's like that would be a wonderful sentiment, something to pass down for generations.
They loved those books when they got them for Christmas, and they said they'd read them like a novel. They
Yes.
went from front to back. They hadn't seen a lot of these pictures. Um, Most people will never see pictures of the relatives because I said they're in the attic, they're in the garage, they're in a basement, and they get passed along to the next person that's willing to take this crate of pictures. And so I have at least one picture of every family member back to 1813.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. My family was savers. Mom had a lot of them, and so I got the pictures from her. And yeah, I love the book. And honestly, the 3 books have got most all of my recipes that I use on a regular basis. And then I create a lot of new ones on my Facebook page. I also do Farm to Table. I'm one of the guest chefs for Farm to Table here in Mount Sterling. There's a group of us chefs that come together and donate our time. And I usually make the dessert. I am the bread pudding queen. That's what I'm known for. And I have about 8 different bread puddings that I make. I learned how to make that at the New Orleans Cooking School. And I use croissants. I don't use hard French bread.
We have a question in the chat that says, Adam's wanting to know, do you have a favorite Food Network personality?
I love to watch the home chefs on MasterChef. I don't watch the others. My mantra is real food for real people that tastes good, and you don't have to buy a spice that costs $13 to use a quarter teaspoon. That's one of my pet peeves. I love to watch them put one leaf and one little grape on it and a swirl. I can do all that, but it's not practical. And so I used practical recipes. I love watching somebody else do it, and I get ideas from some of the things, but I love the home chefs on MasterChef. And this last year, they had the generations, and it was so fun to watch the difference from the boomers to the Gen X to the Gen Zs, how they approached making food. Um, I love the British baking show, and I'm mesmerized by those cakes that don't look like cakes, and they cut into them and they just look like a statue or something else. I mean, I'm mesmerized. I don't know how anybody does that.
I love the British baking show. Actually, I watch that all the time with my wife. Big Paul Hollywood and Prue fan. But so anyways, yeah, we watch Food Network all the time. I was curious if you were into any of those shows. Cartier Brown is one that I like a lot because
Mhm.
so it kind of goes along with your book. She's very much into her heritage growing up in South Carolina. Puts a lot of seafood inspiration, and talks about also her ancestry, just, recipes that she's inherited over time from people, that had less, I guess less, I'm not sure how I would say it, less opportunity. She's African American and kind of goes into, her ancestry a little bit too. And that's what this has kind of reminded me of. Her show is very much rooted in that. But yeah,
I enjoy those. And I tell you what, I watched The Bear. I wouldn't work in a kitchen after watching The Bear. That
yeah,
scares me to death.
the bear is a little bit too extreme for me. I tried that show, but it was
Yeah.
it's a bit, I don't know, a little too much for me.
It's too much. Yes. I went to Nemacolin. It's a resort in southwestern Pennsylvania. and I took a pasta making class. I'd never made pasta, and so I've made pasta since I came home, and it was a lot of fun, making your pasta and then seeing them make the sauce and eating what you had made. So, I love taking a cooking class whenever I go. I always try to get signed up for those. And, I gave a presentation down in New Orleans, and it was a big conference. And luckily, my presentation was on the first day. And then I skipped the conference and I went to the New Orleans cooking school for 3.5 days. Probably shouldn't tell that, but I'm no longer employed. But anyway, I had a lot more fun at the cooking school. I tell you, one of the things that they taught me was the green onion salad dressing is amazing. And so it's nice tasting food from different areas. We travel a lot. We travel a lot to Europe and Canada, and always come back with food ideas. And we took a cruise in Germany and in Prague, and it was a Jewish history tour. And, Mike and I are really interested in any kind of history. And so part of it, when we were on the cruise, a lot of people were saying, well, you're not Jewish. Why are you on this cruise? And I said, I don't have to be Jewish to want to know about your culture and about, the things that happened here in this part of the world. And one of them was from South Africa. And she says, do you make malva pudding? I said, no, what is malva pudding? And she told me what it was. She said, it's the national dessert that everybody loves. And then they found out I was a bourbon chef. They just called me the bourbon lady. And she said, can you bourbonize malva pudding? I said, sure I can. I can bourbonize anything. And so in my second book, I dedicated to Sylvia from South Africa, and I bourbonized her malva pudding with all the sauce in between the layers. So the more than minestrone soup is a mashup of two soups I had in Prague. I liked one really well and I liked the other one really well, but I thought, if I put these together, they might really be good. So it's called More Than Minestrone. And so when we travel, I love tasting new things and bringing it back and making things with it.
I'm going to ask you a very difficult question. So if you need some think time, we're going to give you
I know what
appropriate,
you're going to ask me.
think time. Of
I
all
know
of your
exactly what you're going to
recipes,
ask me.
what's your favorite recipe or your favorite dish that you make?
It's like asking me which one's my favorite child.
I know. I'm so sorry.
I tell you, the one I slaved over the longest were my bourbon balls. It took me 20 years to perfect the bourbon ball till I could get a half shot of bourbon in each one of them and still dip them after they were frozen. You almost need a chaser with them, but I can't go to my in-laws without taking bourbon balls. I can't go to mine without taking bourbon balls. So bourbon balls took me the longest to create. I love the bourbon bacon barbecue meatballs. They are great. They are wonderful tailgate food. I'm doing a monthly guest shot on one of the Chiefs podcast. It's not official Chief, but it's a group that really loves the Chiefs. It's called Tailgating with the Spirited Chef. And so I'm doing a tailgate food, and that's the one I did last time. And also the chili that I make, the bourbon brisket chili, has won 2 chili contests, and we eat that all winter. So those are some of my favorites, but it's kind of like asking, who's your favorite child? Because all these are my favorite.
I saw Dana's comment in the chat. She said, okay, now she's starving. We have done our due diligence in making everyone starved. I know, because hearing you talk about all of these fantastic, and I know Brandy posted something. She went to your Facebook page and she saw the pumpkin pecan cobbler. That just sounds heavenly. I am going to address just some looming questions that we are getting in the chat. I know that Miss Dayna and I have not had this conversation, but we are going to kind of touch base because this was such a fantastic hit, as I knew it would be. And so we would love to possibly have her back. I know there's 126 of us on live tonight. And we do a summer conference. I know Miss Dayna and I talked about this earlier. We do have a summer conference. And I know that you all would love to have her possibly live, possibly at our summer conference, to where maybe she makes a dish for us. And we get to taste some of this fantastic food. And then at summer conference, we can have some cookbooks of hers
Oh.
as well. So look at all the yeses that are coming in. So I know that would be
Thank
amazing.
you. It makes me
Because
feel good.
does, you know, it would absolutely make our stomachs, yeah, a taste group, because everyone was putting in there if you need a taste. So we could possibly, I know our summer plans, Dr. Evans is going to send out some information about that. Yeah, everybody's like, yes, yes. So there, our chat is now exploding. But we would love that opportunity as well. And so we'll kind of get with you on your schedule. I know you do a lot of traveling, but we would love to have an in-person session with you to, and hopefully our plans, we're going to put in our evaluation. We know that by then our cookbook will have been launched. But then hopefully what we're going to take away from this is, one, the importance of, you know, sharing oral traditions, oral stories, and you've taken it to that whole next level. Hopefully from this, there will be some Christmas gifts that people will go in, like you said, go in their attics. They will find those pictures, those mementos, and then tack those on with, you know, I was thinking of my grandmother, you know, like you said, you know, like while people are still here and we can get them in their own handwriting, their favorite recipes, why that's important. And then passing those out to, you know, my siblings who, you know, think, wow, I hadn't even thought of that, because we have this, you know, we are all at the, you know, we have the great luxury of hearing you talk about preserving not just recipes, but the passing of why that's so important. And so just capturing this, this place and time as an oral history project for not just our family members, but also our students in our classroom. So you'll find on your evaluation for tonight, for your attendance check, we're going to talk to, you know, of course, our little challenge, you know, did you tweet about this session? But if you're going to create a classroom cookbook, you know, we're challenging you to do that. You know, of course, finding new ways for in this learning, just like Miss Dayna said, you know, hopefully you'll take this project and you'll run with it in your classroom. And I love what you said at the beginning, like being a creator. Because like you said, you know, we all have those educators in our lives that they are who we can think of that put us in this spot for this moment, that you think back to those people that have like, thank you for, you know, empowering me to give me that voice to have us sitting here. So I'm going to go ahead and give you the evaluation so that you can, if you have other questions that you want to drop in the chat, or if you want to come off mute and ask Miss Dayna while we have her, yeah, you can use Adobe Express, you can use Canva. I know we've got Jamie who is would definitely give you, and I don't know why I put evaluation twice, apologies for that. But Jamie, who would absolutely be willing to assist you in any way. But this session has been amazing. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your gifts and your talents and for starving us all tonight. So my leftovers just do not sound nearly as appetizing after hearing. So thank you all so much. I'm so glad that you all enjoyed this, and I look forward to what you're going to do in your classrooms. And this just makes me all excited for the holidays. So
I would love to be with you all again, and I'm glad to travel. One of the things I'm doing tomorrow night is I'm doing it for our church women, and they wanted me to do a cooking class for them. Well, it's really hard to do it for 25 women. So I gave them all a recipe, and I told them to make the recipe and bring it so we could all taste test it. And I'm on call after 5:30 tonight and all day tomorrow as they make the recipes. And it's called How to Have a Party and Greet Your Guest at the Door. It's recipes you can make 2 weeks, 1 week, 1 day, 2 days ahead of time so that you're not in the kitchen when your guests arrive.
that's fantastic. Yes, yes. So you are getting lots of love. Everyone has loved this session, as we knew
Thank you
they
all so
would
much.
be.
Jamie, thank you. You did a wonderful job on the slides. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And I appreciate the invitation. Y'all been great. And I'm seeing the comments. I'm feeling the love.
Well, you should. I told you that they were a great group, and I knew that they would love this session. And Rebecca says she has some of her great grandmother's recipes in her hand. Oh my goodness, what a treasure. Yeah. Listen, I don't know if you all have seen, and I'll kind of end with this. Have you all seen where they've taken, like their grandmother's recipes and they put them on like cutting boards and then they've hung them, like little, like on like little tiles underneath their kitchen? Like, I love that.
They
I've
also
seen them
put
make
kitchen
wallpaper.
towels.
Wallpaper? Oh, and kitchen towels. Oh,
Yes.
love that. That's great. Oh, the wallpaper. I hadn't seen that one. That's great. Yeah, there's so much that now I'm like, oh, I'm thinking about Christmas gifts for my siblings. I'm like, this is great.
Wendy, whenever we moved into my grandmother's home after she had passed away and left it to us, and we remodeled her kitchen, I took 2 of her recipes in her original handwriting and had this guy I found on Etsy write them on tile, and I put the tile on my backsplash. It's so
Oh.
pretty.
Oh, you'll have
Oh,
to take a
that sounds
picture and see.
wonderful.
Oh, I love it. I love that. That is fantastic. Yeah, I love that. Look at all these. Yeah, Keisha, I agree. I love this. Yeah. Look, oh, she said they're focusing on Kentucky Christmas traditions at our school right now. This is a perfect session for that. Love it. And Kyrie, I can't wait to hear how you all are going to use this with your students. And this is just a perfect like Christmas session, isn't it? It's just get us all in the Christmas feels. Thank you so much, Dayna. This is wonderful. And I'll get with you and we'll talk about how we can utilize you.
Sure.
I knew
Sounds
they would love
good.
it.
Yeah,
knew
I
it.
would love to be with you all face to face.
On the topic of British Bake Show, like, do you have any recipes, like, if you had to try and get a Paul Hollywood handshake, what, like, recipe do you think would secure the Paul Hollywood handshake out of your entire, if you had to choose between, like, 2 or 3?
Popovers. I've got his book. It's the only thing I can make with yeast. I have a hard time with yeast, but we built a new house and now I've got a microwave that's a proofing oven. And so one of the things we're going to be in Jekyll Island January and February. I'm closing my bake shop. Everybody's going to be on diets anyway in January and February. And I'm working on some gluten-free breads. I'll make a Cheddar Bay biscuits. It's gluten-free. Also a focaccia bread that is really good, that's gluten-free. And then I'm going to work on working with yeast because that's one of the things people have asked more for the bake shop is, can you make some breads for us? I make an Irish soda bread and I also make, he's got a good recipe for that in there, but he uses a lot of yeast. So the popovers, I am successful with those out of his book.
Yeah, he gets people for underproved and overproved bread, I feel like, all the time. And
Yes.
so I'm a huge tiramisu fan. What about you?
Yes. And
That's
I
like
make
my
a
favorite.
tiramisu bread pudding.
Okay, cool.
You
So
dip the lady fingers, and I make a Kentucky version of a tiramisu bread pudding. Yes.
yeah, that's like my favorite dessert. My
Great.
wife is really good at making it. I make it with her sometimes, but I feel like what happens, it's the mascarpone is so like high in fat that sometimes it'll start to like curdle a little bit.
Yes.
So that's happened on us a couple times, but when it turns out right, it's perfect.
Just lower the temperature a bit and it'll be good.
Lower the temperature of the mascarpone.
Yes. Just
Okay.
don't when you're, yeah.
So I had wondered that. So like maybe the mascarpone was too cold and then that just caused the fats to separate, you think is probably what it was?
If you heat it too fast, if it's cold, I don't know how you make yours, but a lot of
Mhm.
times to get it all blended in and to get it spread, you heat it up a little bit to make it spread easier.
Yeah.
And if you heat it too fast, it will separate.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. So
Mhm.
Awesome. You've got a question in the chat. So do you have a bake shop? I know you had mentioned someone coming in to buy it. So what is the location of, or do they come into your home and buy?
It's my home. And I only have it once a month. And
Okay.
I put it out there. Right now, I'm doing breakfast boxes that they can pick up on the 23rd or the 24th for their celebrations at Christmas. And it's got several pastries, chocolate coffee toffee donuts, the sweet potato donut. I mean, muffins, the sweet potato muffins, the almond blueberry. I make the Nutella walnut swirls and the pecan cinnamon twist, as well as the maple apple cider mini donuts and the maple scones, maple scones. So anyway, they order
Dee
them,
said,
come to my
take my
house.
money. I agree. You're starving.
I am a home baker. That's the problem. I'm also the spirited chef. I can't put alcohol in anything according to the Kentucky law. But and I can't use cream cheese. So all mine is pure buttercream when I make cakes. I made an apple shine Betty pie, 18 of them for Thanksgiving for this business, along with sorghum molasses cookies. They're called Joe Froggers. My great grandmother that you saw a picture of taught me to make the Joe Froggers. I've never had any sorghum molasses cookies that taste like them. And so those are the things that I put out in the bake shop. I made 12 of the pumpkin pecan cobblers. They are so good. It's like a cake on top, and when you scoop it, it's got the sauce like those lava cakes on the bottom. So good with ice cream. I like it so much better than a pumpkin pie.
Mm. Yeah.
But the bake shop, I had somebody, I did what was called the ultimate girl party a month ago, and it was at a school, and this woman bought a lot of my treats. And per Kentucky law, I have to put not only my name, but my address where these things were created.
Right.
Well, she's not on Facebook, but she had my address. And today somebody pulled up in the driveway and I said, I recognize that person. She came up to the front door and she says, I want some Kentucky Crunch. I need it. My family, I think I've got them all hooked on this Kentucky Crunch. I made 800 bags in the last 2 months. It's a butter toffee puff corn that has no kernels with dark chocolate and praline pecans. And I could make it every week and it would just go out the door. And
Wow.
we love it. And when I make it, it has to go out the door. I'll eat the whole bag. It's our favorite snack.
Yeah, you are. Helena said I'm dying over here.
I had
This could
somebody
be
call. We made treats at church for this group that was building our columbarium beside our church for burial urns. And they were from North Carolina. And so they were working so hard. And I just had a bake sale and I had a few leftover items. And the lady that's in our church, she says, do you have anything left that we could take them? So I made them a box of treats to take back to their hotel room because they were here for a few weeks. They came back and bought more boxes from me, and then they took it to North Carolina. And their girlfriend wanted to know if I could ship. I said, I don't ship food, but I'll give you the recipe because you're not competition for me. So it was cherry pie bars, and I make Butterfinger Buckeye balls with Butterfinger bars instead of just peanut butter.
Wow. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, we definitely have to have you for an in-person for sure. So
We'll do a taste test.
I love it. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. That'll be awesome. So I will get with you and this will be fantastic. And thank you again so much for this afternoon. It was
Thank you
wonderful.
all. You've been great. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I told you that they were
I
wonderful.
know you did. You were right.
Yeah, well, have a great evening and we'll
All
talk
right.
soon. All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks so much. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Wasn't that just the best? She's just a joy. Like, just a pleasure.
You're Jamie, stop recording.